Hello champions, welcome to my math class. I'm going to teach distance time graph. We'll start by introducing what is a distance time graph, and we're going to analyze different questions in different concepts. Okay, number one, we say what is a distance time graph? Yesterday we talked about distance time graph, and I said a distance time graph shows the movement of an object in a specific direction, and it shows how an object can move in a given time. We also discussed about whereby there is a rest in between the journey, what's being done. So we understand that we have a graph. So in a distance time graph, we'll have a graph of y-axis, and then we'll also have a graph of x-axis. And then in between we have an object moving, then it's rested from a specific period of time to a point. Let's say you have an object A going to B, then rest to point C, and then it moved from point C to another point D. So you can see if this is a car, it's moving in different time, and then we also have the distance covered, maybe distance in kilometer. So you can see that there was a time that this car did not make any movement. So we say this is at the point of rest, like maybe from B to C. This time the car did not make any movement, so there's no change. So this is called distance time graph. We use what did we discuss? We said a distance time graph is used to describe the motion of an object and calculate its speed. So we have distance in kilometers and time. Let's say our time is in hours. And we know that to calculate speed of an object will be equal distance divided by time. Now let's assume this is 0, and then let's say this is 1, 2, 3, then we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, then we have 12 hours. And then here we have 2, we have 4, we have 6, we have 8, we have 10, we have 11, we have 12. Okay, so we have 12 kilometers. Now let's assume we want to find the speed of this car from point A to point B. So if you're finding the speed of this car from point A to point B, we know to move from point A to point B, first of all, it covered how many kilometers? It covered 8 kilometers. So it covered 8 kilometers, the distance, which is the distance, and the time taken from point A to point B, it covered 4 hours. So if you're finding the speed, you say speed is distance divided by time, whereby you say distance is 8 kilometers and time is 4 hours. So our speed will be 8 divided by 4 is 2 kilometers per hour. So this becomes the speed of this car. Now, what we have to understand about a distance time graph, that in a distance time graph, if this is y-axis and this is x-axis, in a distance time graph, and this represent distance. So in a distance time graph, a straight line, what does a straight line represent? We say a straight line, it shows a constant speed of an object. So in other words, we say the speed of this car is constant throughout the journey. In what manner? Let's say 0, this is 1, and when it's 1, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if it's 1 time, let's say this time in hours and distance in kilometers. So after 1 hour, the car covered 1 kilometer. 2 hours, the car covered 2 kilometers. So if you're finding the rate of change throughout line, you'll find that it has a constant gradient, which represents a constant speed. That's it. So we need to have that. So we say a straight line. So this object distance is increasing with time. In other words, it's moving further away from its starting position, and the graph shows a moving object moving further away from its original at a constant speed. So this shows that a straight line represents a constant speed of an object. And then we say if an object is moving at a constant speed, the distance time graph will be a straight line. And if the constant speed is 0, the line will be horizontal. So we say at stationary, there is no rate of change. So if there is no rate of change, the speed is equal to 0. No distance is covered and no time is spent. No distance. So we say at stationary, there is no rate of change and the speed is equal to 0. That's also something that we need to know when solving a distance time graph question. Another concept when doing questions that come from distance time graph in IGCSE extended math, we say if the constant speed is non-zero, the line will have a gradient. Yes. So if a constant speed is non-zero, the line will have a gradient. That's also very important. What does this mean? So we remember we talked about when you have, let's say if this is the graph y-axis. So here we'll mostly be drawing vertical graph, and then we have horizontal graph. This is x-axis. Then we said sometimes you might have a graph going to a specific direction to this point, and then this is it's horizontal, then it goes straight. So we say if this at this point the speed here is equal to 0 from point A to point B, the speed here is 0. Then from point B to point C, there is a gradient, like there is shift of position, because if you are looking for the change, the time spent for the B to move from point B to point C, a shift on X and a shift on Y. Change of Y divided by change of X will be equal to the rate of change, which is the speed. Okay, so we understand that. And then we say the gradient of a distance time graph represents the magnitude of the object's velocity or its speed. Wow. Another thing that we need to understand, we say the gradient of a distance time graph represents the magnitude of the object velocity or its speed. So we say the gradient of a distance time graph represents the magnitude of the object's velocity or its speed. Another concept, we say a steeper slope or a higher gradient represents a greater speed. A shallow slope or a lower gradient represents a slower speed. So a shallower slope or a lower gradient represent. So if you have a steeper slope, it means if the slope is very steep, this means high speed. That means a short distance, so it means this is a higher distance covered in a short period of time. A greater distance covered in a short period of time. Like for example, this is steeper. It means small distance has been covered in more time. You see here shorter time. This is short. It means a shorter distance was covered in long time. That means you'll have this, your speed will be low. So we want to see how different speed on a distance time graph look like. If you want to show a different speed, so we said when you have a graph, distance time graph, and you have y-axis and x-axis, and we say this a straight line represent constant speed. Then we said a line below it, this one, will represent shallower speed or mean small speed. Anything towards the x-axis, it means you are covering a short distance in more time. If you're covering short distance in longer time, that means your speed is very slow. An object that moves fast, it has to cover larger distance with less time. That's why for business people, they will choose to travel by air rather than the road, because with the road transport, you will have to cover longer distance, more or longer time. Like for example, from here to Mwanza, it's maybe 1,000 kilometers. You can spend maybe let's say you can spend more than 18 hours. With air, you'll find that the same distance, it's longer distance covered under a short period of time. So you can see the speed is higher with plane, and it helps us to reach faster in a specific location. Wow. Then, so we understand about that. So we know for a graph that shows a changing speed, a graph change in speed on distance time graph. How can change in speed on distance time graph represented? This is number one. We say if an object is not constant. Okay, we say rule number one. If the speed of an object is not constant, we say an object is accelerating. So even in IGCSE math, you'll be asked about acceleration. Calculate the acceleration of a car from point A to point B. So we say, now we have understood what is acceleration. We say if an object doesn't have a constant speed, we say the object is accelerating. So the distance time graph will be, so what will be the distance time graph? So a distance time graph that shows a car that is accelerating will be a curved line. So whenever you see a curved line and it's a distance time graph, that shows this car does not have a constant speed, and therefore the car will be accelerating, or an object will be accelerating. Not only the car, it can be even a bicycle, motorcycle, so or a plane. We say now this one is accelerating. It means there is a change in speed in every point. Like there's a change in speed. Therefore, and yeah, there is either an increase or a decrease. If it's a decrease, that's deceleration. But if it's an increase, that is acceleration. Okay, so a curve on a distance time graph is a changing gradient. So we know a curve on a distance time graph is a changing gradient. So we say, so if the gradient increases over time, what does that mean? If the gradient increases over time, the speed is increasing over time. And then we say if the gradient decreases over time, the speed is decreasing over time. So how do we show that? So we'll draw our curve y x-axis. So this is the curve. We have, that's curve number one. So, and then we have another curve here. So what does this mean? This shows or represent a decreasing slope. Means this one means an increase in speed. Wow. So how do you use using distance time graph? Now you can have different kind of questions to use distance time graph, and we can calculate different kind of questions. So I'm going to solve questions that are involved in distance time graph, and I'm going to show you how we can solve each example without struggling. See you at the Top Champion.